I'm not here to babysit, micromanage, or any of that. I'm not here to be a plant. I'm not here to steal minutes. I'm not here to steal nobody's job. I'm here to win.
Memphis Grizzlies have a huge problem, and unfortunately, I don't really know what the solution is, but based upon their record, you don't really have to be a genius to know that this season could very well be a lost season. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop, like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Now that we get all of that out of the way, cue the intro. Leading up to the season, I spammed predictions at you guys consistently. Michael Porter Jr. needed over 5.5 rebounds in his season debut. Tyreek Hill just needed a touchdown, and Steph Curry just needed 1 point. Shout out to those that tailed. For those of you guys that were able to make money, we're giving away our picks for free all season long for the NBA and NFL on my Instagram at TheFlightMike. And right now, when you use promo code microphone on Prize Picks, they'll match your deposit up until $100. Thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I apologize if my voice sounds a little off, guys. I'm a little sick, or at the very minimum, I have a sore throat. The Memphis Grizzlies have been in the midst of one of the most incredible rebuilds I think I've ever seen as a fan of basketball. I mean, they crushed 3 straight NBA drafts. In 2018, they selected Jaren Jackson Jr. with the 4th overall pick, and so far, he's already made an All-Star game, is the defending Defensive Player of the Year, and has made 2 All-Defensive first teams. The next year, they selected Ja Morant with the number 2 overall pick, who at some point possessed the charisma to potentially be the face of the NBA someday from a marketing perspective. I mean, Powerade revived their campaign just to build it around Ja Morant. He just happened to get in his own way. And then finally, Desmond Bane in 2020, at the end of the 2020 NBA draft, who is a phenomenal compliment to Ja Morant and has been getting better year after year after year, and has yet to have a season where he hasn't shot at least 41% from 3. It's not just their 3 young stars that are really good. This team has historically been very good at trading for veteran talent or role players that fit within their mold. Players like Steven Adams, or drafting Dillon Brooks, or drafting Brandon Clark late in the NBA draft, bringing in Tyus Jones, are all examples of intelligent decisions that have made the Memphis Grizzlies what they are today. As a matter of fact, they were so good that in the 2021 to 2022 season, in a breakout season for the Grizzlies, when Ja Morant got injured for 25 games, the Memphis Grizzlies still won 20 out of those 25 games, which is unheard of. There were legitimate arguments that the Memphis Grizzlies might be better without Ja Morant than with Ja Morant. And in 2022 to 2023, they were expected to take the next step. But unfortunately, every single distraction under the sun made it a little bit too much for the Grizzlies to overcome. I mean, this is a team that was good enough to finish 2nd place in the West, despite Ja Morant deciding to record himself playing with guns multiple times in the season. But once they got into the playoffs, for some reason, Dillon Brooks decided to become a even bigger distraction by poking bears.
I don't care, he's old. I poke bears. I don't respect no one until they come and give me 40.
All of this resulted in the Grizzlies telling Dillon Brooks that they're moving on from him the moment that the season ends, and their general manager Zach Kleiman making his expectations clear for what he's expecting for next year's iteration of the Memphis Grizzlies.
I mean, as I said, like there were definitely, some self-created distractions, in the series and along the way. We're going to take a different approach, as it pertains to that next season. I think you'll see a different approach from this team, but at the same time, confidence is important. There's nothing wrong with, some level of trash talking. We want a group that goes out there and competes and, is in that together. And that's part of the NBA, at some level. But there's a line, there's a line there, certainly. And I don't think that's lost on anyone here.
So going into the offseason, the Memphis Grizzlies had some things that they had to figure out. On one hand, it's clear that they're moving on from Dillon Brooks. They have to figure out how to remain competitive and also make up for the fact that Ja Morant is going to be out for a significant portion of the season, almost half of the season. And the decision that the Memphis Grizzlies made at the time on paper made a lot of sense. In the end of June, the Memphis Grizzlies decided to move on from Tyus Jones, trading him to the Washington Wizards that would send Kristaps Porzingis to the Boston Celtics and would bring Marcus Smart to the Grizzlies. On paper, this made a lot of sense. You have your new Dillon Brooks archetype that is significantly more efficient and is a savvy veteran, who has been to the NBA Finals already, but has made it to the Eastern Conference Finals multiple times as well. This is an individual that's battle tested and knows what it's going to have to take in order to get the Memphis Grizzlies over the hump. And at the time, I praised the trade. I thought it was a brilliant trade, but there were some concerns. Tyus Jones was one of the best backup point guards in the NBA, and the fact that the Memphis Grizzlies were so competitive without Ja Morant is really a testament to Tyus Jones. So trading Tyus Jones was a little bit of a risk, but to really ensure that the Memphis Grizzlies had the guard depth that they had before Tyus Jones left, they brought in an offensive guard that was considered to be a Memphis hero, and that's Derrick Rose. Now, I do admit Derrick Rose returning to Memphis to play as a member of the Grizzlies as opposed to a member of the Tigers was a very cute story, and I don't think anyone was really expecting Derrick Rose to be the Derrick Rose that he was before he tore his ACL, obviously. They just needed a veteran leader that would motivate this young team and make sure that there were individuals in the locker room to keep this team together. No one that would necessarily poke bears the way Dillon Brooks would. And even Derrick Rose, from the very moment he decided to take on this new role, that he wasn't here to babysit all these young players.
So, I mean, I'll leave it brief. I'm not going to tell you everything that we talked about, but same thing like I told, I could beat around the bush a little bit. I'm not here to babysit. I'm not here to babysit, micromanage, or any of that. I'm not here to be a plant in the locker room, any of that. I'm here to help guys win. I'm not here to steal minutes. I'm not here to steal nobody's job. I'm here to win.
So based upon Memphis's past and their success without Ja Morant, combined with their new additions that make a lot of sense on paper and getting rid of the players that they felt like were holding them back, like Dillon Brooks, you would think that they would get off to a good start this season. I mean, of course, Ja Morant is out, but historically, they've done just fine without him. And the exact opposite has occurred so far. At the time that we're recording this video, the Memphis Grizzlies are the worst team in the Western Conference. Hell, the worst team in the NBA with a 1-6 record. They finally won their first game versus the Portland Trailblazers on Sunday through a Herculean effort by Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane, which is very concerning considering the fact that I'd imagine that the Memphis Grizzlies' plan going into this season was simply just weather the storm until Ja Morant returns. Like, this was a team that was second in the West last year and lost to a play-in team in the Los Angeles Lakers. And I said at the time that a lot of the issues, I believed, were distractions. So what is causing this problem for the Memphis Grizzlies? Well, I have multiple theories. The first one being that they're really missing Tyus Jones. Tyus Jones is one of the best backup point guards in the NBA, and last year was his breakout season. He's entering his prime right now, and he's crushing it for the Washington Wizards. Throughout his career, Tyus Jones has always had a positive VORP, except for his rookie season with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and he didn't really get a lot of minutes that year. He's always been positive in box plus minus and OBPM metrics, but he's always been a positive on defensive box plus minus as well. But if you look at his basic statistics, this man was dishing out 5 assists coming off of the bench last year. So missing him could be very significant. You're also trying to integrate new parts of the Memphis Grizzlies into the offense, like Derrick Rose, for instance, who has been by far the biggest liability on the Memphis Grizzlies this year. Now, I know it's been a few games and Derrick Rose has only played in 4 games so far, but in those 4 games, if you take a look at his advanced metrics, this man is putting up negative statistics like I've never seen. Now, again, very young season, very small sample size, but in this small sample size, he has a negative 6.6 box plus minus, a negative 3 on defense, and a negative 3.6 on offense for a negative 0.1 VORP. This is insane when you consider the fact that you're on the same team as Marcus Smart and Jaren Jackson Jr. Now, Derrick Rose is currently out with a knee injury. Kind of silly to put the blame on a player that has barely played for half of the season for the Memphis Grizzlies. So the final theory really, in my opinion, could be struggling to integrate Marcus Smart into the Memphis Grizzlies offense. Historically, Marcus Smart has been a better defensive player than offensive player, but this year he's a significantly bigger offensive liability than he has been in years past. Now you might be thinking, Mike, how could that be possible? He's averaging the most points per game that he has so far in 7 games. Well, Marcus Smart is averaging an asinine 4 turnovers per game so far. Now again, this number's inflated, only 7 games have been played. Averaging that number through 7 games is nuts. He's also averaging 2.7 steals per game for the record. What exactly is the problem? Well, by trading Tyus Jones and depending on Derrick Rose, you took a pretty big downgrade at your backup point guard position, at least offensively. But on top of that, you lost Derrick Rose, so you don't even have your backup option anymore, even though it's a sizable downgrade. And now you're depending on Marcus Smart to be your primary point guard and ball handler, which is something he's never really been good at historically. Marcus Smart has been more of a 2 guard than a point guard or a player that just plays off of someone else that's ball dominant. He isn't necessarily tasked with ball handler duties. He's primarily there for his defense. The solution to the problem is very easy and very simple. Ja Morant just needs to come back. By Ja Morant coming back, Marcus Smart no longer needs to be the primary ball handler. He could focus on just complementing Ja, and he could apply his signature defensive pressure on whichever team that they're going up against. And he could fill the role that he was brought in here to fill. But the problem is when you're 1-6, starting out the season 0-6, and you have 18 more games to go before your star player could come back, the odds of you being competitive once your star player comes back in this Western Conference are very, very slim. It might be too much ground to make up. Just looking at the Western Conference now, the records are insane. I mean, the Phoenix Suns haven't been healthy and they're 3-4. The Sacramento Kings aren't off to the greatest start and they're in 13th place, 2-4. But at the very top, you have the Denver Nuggets and Dallas Mavericks, who have only lost 1 game so far. Then the Warriors. The Timberwolves have been resurgent, and we have a video on that coming up soon. The Pelicans with Zion are as good as advertised. The Thunder are exceeding expectations. And then you have the Clippers, who recently swung a trade for James Harden. You have the Houston Rockets and the San Antonio Spurs and the Los Angeles Lakers, who are prime candidates for play-in spots. And you're currently 1-6. And again, I don't blame the Grizzlies for making the decision they did. It on paper made a lot of sense to trade for Marcus Smart. Dillon Brooks came off as pompous. You may have blamed Dillon Brooks for the fact that you guys lost to the Los Angeles Lakers. And to be honest, it's not unfair to blame him. I wouldn't say it's solely on him, but he didn't really help. And in a season where your team seems very talented but very immature, it made sense to move on from a player like Dillon Brooks and bring in a player like Marcus Smart. Sacrificing Tyus Jones in order to get that may not have been worth it, at least from what we're seeing. At the end of the day, I think this might be a lost season for the Memphis Grizzlies, which at least will result in them getting a high draft pick where they could end up with a player like Ron Holland or Matas Buzelis. But either way, it seems like so far, based upon Ja Morant's absence and what the Grizzlies needed to get through Ja Morant's absence, Memphis Grizzlies may have made a horrific mistake. Grizzlies fans, let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about all this. Do you agree with me? Do you think they should have brought back Dillon Brooks and maybe passed on the Marcus Smart trade, kept Tyus Jones? Do you think they should have ran it back and hope that the previous iteration of the Grizzlies learned their lesson? Or do you think when Ja Morant returns, this team's going to be good enough to be competitive? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.